The Zephyrian High Council had studied humanity for decades before making their decision. Through their quantum observatories, they had watched the species wage wars over resources, poison their own atmosphere, and commit countless acts of violence against their own kind. When Earth's radio signals finally reached Zephyrian space, the Council's verdict was unanimous. This plague of a species could not be allowed to spread beyond their solar system. "They are a contamination," declared High Counselor Thexavar, his crystalline form pulsing with indignant light. "We have seen what happens when violent species achieve interstellar travel. The Void Runners, the Crimson Horde, both started as planetary parasites before becoming galactic menaces. The solution seemed elegant in its simplicity. The Zephyrians had perfected biological warfare millennia ago, developing pathogens so sophisticated they could target specific genetic markers while remaining undetectable until fully deployed. They would send 3 waves. First, a respiratory plague to weaken the population. Second, a neurological pathogen to disrupt their military capabilities. And finally, a genetic plague to ensure sterility. Within a generation, Earth would be silent, ready for Zephyrian colonization. Dr. Sarah Chen was working late in her Atlanta CDC laboratory when the first reports came in. Strange respiratory symptoms were appearing simultaneously across 6 continents, always starting in major population centers, always following the same progression. The pathogen didn't match anything in their databases, and its complexity suggested an intelligence behind its design. "This isn't natural," she told the emergency response team via hologram. "The protein folding is too precise, the targeting mechanism too specific. Someone made this." While world governments scrambled to impose quarantines, Chen and thousands of researchers like her across the globe began the most important race in human history. They had advantages the Zephyrians hadn't counted on: quantum computers that could model molecular interactions in real time, AI systems trained on every known pathogen, and most critically, a global network of scientists who shared data instantly across all borders. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source. Dr. Amit Patel, a graduate student in Mumbai, noticed that the pathogen's attack vector resembled a theoretical bioweapon design he'd read about in a declassified military paper. More importantly, the design had a fatal flaw: an over-specialization that made it vulnerable to a simple protein inhibitor. "It's too perfect," Patel explained to the Global Research Collective. "They designed it to be unstoppable against our current immune systems, but they didn't account for synthetic enhancement." Within 72 hours of Patel's discovery, every major pharmaceutical company on Earth had retooled their production lines. The cure wasn't just effective, it was distributed for free, delivered by military aircraft to every corner of the globe. The first Zephyrian plague was neutralized in 6 days. High Counselor Thexavar watched the reports with growing unease. Not only had the humans developed a cure with impossible speed, but they had distributed it without regard for profit or political boundaries. This was not the behavior their models had predicted. "Deploy the second wave," he ordered. The neurological plague was more subtle, designed to cause confusion, memory loss, and impaired decision-making in military leaders. The Zephyrians expected chaos, civil wars, the collapse of command structures. Instead, they got Admiral Rosa Martinez. Martinez had been infected early, but the human response was unprecedented. Rather than hiding their leader's condition, Earth's governments immediately implemented Protocol Omega, a contingency plan that assumed all senior leadership might be compromised. Every major decision was now made by committee, with multiple redundancies and AI-assisted analysis. The infected leaders didn't try to maintain power. They willingly stepped down and submitted to treatment. Dr. Chen's team cracked the second pathogen even faster, having learned the Zephyrians' design philosophy. But this time, they didn't just cure it. They reverse-engineered it, creating a template that could neutralize similar attacks. "They're learning our methods," Thexavar observed, his light dimming with concern. "Deploy the final plague. Even if they cure it, the damage will be done." The genetic plague was the Zephyrians' masterpiece, a virus that would gradually sterilize the human population over several generations. Too slow to trigger immediate panic, too complex to cure quickly. They were certain this would succeed where the others had failed. They were wrong. Dr. Elena Vasquez, leading the Mexican team that first identified the genetic plague, made a discovery that changed everything. The virus carried markers, essentially a signature of its creator's genetic structure. "We don't just know how to cure this," she announced to the Global Research Network. "We know who sent it." The cure took 2 weeks to develop and deploy. But humanity's response didn't end there. Admiral Martinez, fully recovered and leading the newly formed Earth Defense Coalition, stood before the United Nations as she announced humanity's reply to their attackers. "We know who you are," she said, her voice carrying to every nation on Earth and, through carefully aimed radio transmissions, to the Zephyrian homeworld. "We know where you are. You tried to commit genocide against our species and you failed. You wanted to see what humanity is capable of when threatened with extinction." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "You're about to find out." The response fleet launched 3 months later, a joint effort combining every space-capable nation's resources. The ships carried 2 payloads. The first was a cure for the Zephyrian equivalent of cancer, synthesized from the genetic markers their bioweapons had inadvertently provided. The second payload was significantly less benevolent. High Counselor Thexvar received both messages simultaneously. The cure came with a simple note: "We don't solve problems by eliminating entire species. We solve them by making life better." The Warheads came with a different message: "But if you try to hurt innocent people again, we'll solve the problem differently." The Zephyrian High Council faced their first unanimous vote in centuries. Motion: immediate and permanent non-aggression pact with Earth with full diplomatic recognition and technology-sharing agreements. The vote was unanimous. Dr. Sarah Chen, now serving as Earth's first ambassador of planetary health, smiled as she read the Zephyrian surrender. Humanity had passed their first test as a spacefaring species, not through conquest or destruction, but by proving that their greatest strength wasn't their capacity for violence, but their refusal to let anyone suffer when they had the power to help, even their enemies.